3 Days of the Condor wasn't just another paranoid spy thriller, it was Hollywood's sharpest warning shot about government secrecy and corporate betrayal in the mid-1970s. What audiences didn't see on screen was the chaos behind the camera. Real CIA interference, dangerous on-location shoots in Manhattan, and a director who pushed Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway to their breaking points. This isn't the polished Cold War fantasy you remember. It was a production filled with mistrust, near disasters, and shocking real-world connections. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 20 weird facts about 3 Days of the Condor, from government watchdogs on set to the chilling accuracy of its plot, to fights that nearly derailed the shoot. And wait until you hear the bonus fact, a revelation so strange it feels like fiction. Let's dive in. 1. The CIA actually monitored the production. Most thrillers invent their government paranoia. 3 Days of the Condor lived it. During shooting in New York, whispers circulated that the CIA had taken an unusual interest in the script. James Grady's original novel had already raised eyebrows for its uncanny depiction of CIA front operations, and when Paramount optioned it, Langley reportedly dispatched observers. Crew members recalled strangers on set who weren't part of production but lingered near filming locations. Redford himself later said, "We weren't sure who was watching who." What audiences didn't know was that the agency feared exposure of real clandestine methods. It wasn't just fiction colliding with reality. It was reality trying to control fiction. That eerie overlap made the paranoia in the final cut feel even more authentic. 2. Redford insisted on rewriting his character. Robert Redford wasn't content to play Joe Turner as written. In the original novel, Turner is more of a straightforward analyst turned reluctant survivor. Redford wanted him vulnerable, yet sharp, a man forced into paranoia. He pressed director Sidney Pollack for rewrites, adding layers of mistrust and uncertainty. What wasn't in the script? Turner's biting skepticism of American institutions, a reflection of Redford's own growing political awareness. Pollack later admitted Redford shaped the film's conscience. He didn't just want to play a spy, he wanted to question the system itself. This wasn't just actor's ego. It shifted the entire tone of the movie from a conventional thriller into a critique of power. Without Redford's push, Condor might have been just another chase film. Instead, it became a mirror of post-Watergate disillusionment. 3. Faye Dunaway hated. Her character's original arc. Faye Dunaway was fresh off Chinatown, but when she read the Condor script, she nearly turned it down. Kathy Hale, her character, was initially written as a passive damsel kidnapped by Redford's Turner. Dunaway balked. She told Pollack, "This woman needs an interior life, otherwise she's just wallpaper." To address her concerns, Pollack allowed her to reshape Kathy's role. The result? The photography scenes, haunting portraits of loneliness that Dunaway suggested to give Kathy depth. Ironically, those sequences are now some of the film's most memorable. What audiences didn't know is that Dunaway fought hard not to be reduced to a spy movie accessory. She injected her own artistry, elevating Kathy from hostage to one of the most layered female characters in 1970s thrillers. 4. The winter shoot nearly broke the cast. The movie looks cold because it was. Filming in Manhattan during the dead of winter wasn't planned for comfort. It was survival. Redford and Dunaway endured brutal temperatures, with crew members recalling how camera lenses frosted over between takes. To capture realism, Pollack refused to stage warm interiors during chase scenes. Actors were forced to shiver on camera, their breath clouding the lens. Redford later confessed that exhaustion blurred into performance. "I didn't have to act paranoid, the cold did it for me." The production lost days to snowstorms, pushing Paramount's patience thin. But the misery worked. Audiences felt the chill of paranoia, not just the weather. What looked like a polished thriller was built on raw physical discomfort, etched permanently into every frame. 5. Cliff Robertson fought with Sidney Pollack on set behind the scenes. Not everyone agreed on tone. Cliff Robertson, who played Higgins, reportedly clashed with director Sidney Pollack over line delivery. Robertson wanted his CIA character cold and bureaucratic, while Pollack pushed for subtle menace. At one point, Robertson stormed off set after a shouting match, delaying production for hours. Crew members remembered the tension whenever Robertson and Pollack were in the same room. Yet, paradoxically, their conflict fueled Robertson's performance. His clipped, icy authority wasn't just acting, it was born from genuine resentment. What audiences didn't realize was that the mistrust on screen mirrored real mistrust behind the camera. The line between performance and reality blurred, making Higgins' final speech about keeping America safe sting with unintended authenticity. 6. The book became 3 days for a dark reason. James Grady's original novel was titled 6 Days of the Condor, but when Sidney Pollack adapted it, he slashed the timeline in half. Why? Partly for pacing, but partly because of paranoia over plausibility. Pollack felt that an average CIA analyst on the run wouldn't last 6 days alive. 3 felt real, he later explained. Cutting the time frame also intensified the dread. Turner isn't leisurely outsmarting the system. He's racing the clock. What audiences didn't realize was that this brutal decision made the story more terrifying. It wasn't a game of cat and mouse. It was a countdown to certain death. The title. Change wasn't cosmetic. It was Pollack's way of reminding viewers survival in a world of conspiracies isn't measured in weeks. It's measured in hours. 7. The fake CIA office was real enough to fool workers. One of the film's most unsettling sequences is the massacre at Turner's CIA front office, disguised as a Manhattan literary society. Here's the kicker. The production design was so authentic that actual employees from nearby offices mistook it for a real government building. Paramount had secured an unassuming townhouse in New York, filling it with books, file cabinets, and coded equipment. Pedestrians walking past assumed it was another gray federal outpost. Crew joked that the set was so convincing they expected real agents to walk in. And according to legend, one day someone did, an unannounced visitor who asked a few too many questions before leaving without explanation. It wasn't just set dressing. It was a mirror of Cold War secrecy sitting in plain sight. 8. Pollack and Redford nearly ended their partnership over it. Sidney Pollack and Robert Redford had one of Hollywood's strongest collaborations, Jeremiah Johnson, The Way We Were, and later, Out of Africa. But Condor almost broke them. Redford wanted more political fire, leaning into CIA scandals and post-Watergate cynicism. Pollack worried it would alienate audiences. Their debates were so heated that crew members joked about choosing sides. At one point, Pollack told Redford, "You're making a political speech. I'm making a movie." Redford shot back, "Maybe the movie is the speech." The tension seeped into Turner's constant questioning of authority. Ironically, the clash made the film stronger, but behind the camera, it came close to ending one of cinema's most fruitful actor-director pairings. Condor wasn't just about paranoia. It was made in paranoia. 9. The film accidentally predicted CIA scandals. Here's where fiction blurred into terrifying reality. When 3 Days of the Condor hit theaters in 1975, its plot about the CIA assassinating its own operatives for discovering secret projects sounded outrageous. But within months, the Church Committee hearings revealed shocking abuses by the real CIA, illegal surveillance, assassinations, and domestic spying. Suddenly, Condor looked less like escapism and more like prophecy. Viewers gasped at how closely the movie mirrored reality. Even Pollack admitted he was shaken. "We thought we were exaggerating. Then the hearings proved we weren't." What audiences didn't know was that Condor had unintentionally tapped into the deepest fears of an unraveling America. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was documentary. The timing transformed the film from thriller into cultural lightning rod. 10th, Redford did his own rooftop stunt. Not everything was politics. Sometimes it was pure danger. In one of the movie's most iconic shots, Joe Turner scrambles across a Manhattan rooftop to escape gunmen. The studio wanted a stunt double. Redford refused. He argued that the audience had to see him in genuine peril. The crew rigged minimal safety measures, but the rooftop was slick with winter ice. Redford leapt anyway, his breath visible in the frigid air. Cameramen later admitted they were terrified he'd slip. What audiences didn't know is that Redford risked his life for authenticity. No stuntman, no green screen, just an actor clinging to a rooftop ledge, one mistake away from disaster. That's why the scene pulses with real fear, because it wasn't simulated. It was survival. 11. The crew feared a real attack. During filming a CIA conspiracy movie in mid-1970s Manhattan meant every shadow looked suspicious. During exterior shoots, crew members noticed unmarked cars idling across the street and unfamiliar men watching with binoculars. Pollock later admitted he sometimes wondered if they were being surveilled by real intelligence operatives. One night shoot was even interrupted when police questioned why production trucks were parked near a government building. The line between film and reality blurred dangerously. For the cast, it was unsettling, but also perfect. Redford said, "We didn't have to pretend someone was watching. We knew they were." And before we hit the top 10 facts, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the deeper we go, the darker the secrets get. 12. The iconic ending was a last-minute rewrite. The movie's ending is unforgettable. Turner confronts Higgins outside the New York Times, only to hear the chilling question, "What if they don't print it?" What audiences didn't know is that this wasn't the original ending. Early drafts ended with Turner simply handing over files, but Pollock and Redford felt it lacked punch. Just weeks before the final cut, they wrote and shot the newspaper scene. It was a gamble. The studio worried it was too bleak. Yet it became the film's defining moment, perfectly capturing the fragility of truth in a corrupt system. Without that rewrite, Condor might have ended on a whimper. Instead, it ended on a whisper that still echoes in modern political thrillers. 13. The Hitman was based on a real assassin. Max von Sydow's chilling turn as Joubert, the polite contract killer, remains one of cinema's most unsettling portrayals of an assassin. What audiences didn't know is that his character was loosely modeled after accounts of real European mercenaries operating during the Cold War. Pollock wanted a killer who was sophisticated, cultured, and detached, not a thug, but a professional. Von Sydow reportedly researched actual cases of political killings in Paris and Geneva, noting how killers blended into polite society. The result was terrifying, a hitman who could walk into a dinner party unnoticed, then calmly execute his target. Audiences weren't watching a movie villain. They were watching a reflection of the very real, very quiet killers that intelligence agencies employed. 14. The film sparked government denials. When 3 days of The Condor premiered, critics called it one of the most paranoid thrillers ever made. But some people in Washington didn't find it entertaining. Multiple journalists later reported that CIA representatives contacted studios and press outlets to downplay the film's accuracy. One agency spokesperson even claimed, "This isn't how the CIA operates." Yet the timing, just as the Church Committee hearings exposed real abuses, made the denial sound hollow. For the filmmakers, the reaction was proof they had struck a nerve. Pollock joked, "If they say it isn't true, that probably means it is." What audiences didn't realize was that Condor wasn't just criticized by reviewers, it was challenged by the government it portrayed. 15. The romance scene nearly got cut. The love scene between Joe Turner and Kathy Hale remains one of the film's most controversial elements. Some critics argued it felt abrupt, even troubling, given the circumstances. What audiences didn't know is that Paramount nearly cut it altogether. Executives worried it would derail the pacing and risk alienating viewers. But Redford and Dunaway fought to keep it, believing it revealed Turner's humanity and Kathy's conflicted loneliness. Pollock compromised by shooting it with a subdued, almost melancholy tone, rather than Hollywood glamour. Dunaway later admitted she was uncomfortable with how sudden the scene played, but also proud it avoided cliché. The moment lingers in debate to this day, awkward, haunting, and deeply human. A reminder that paranoia doesn't erase desire, but twists it. 16. Gordon Willis. Shot it like a horror film. Nicknamed the Prince of Darkness, cinematographer Gordon Willis was famous for his moody visuals in The Godfather. On Condor, he leaned even darker. Willis used natural light and deep shadows to make New York City feel claustrophobic and dangerous. Offices weren't just workplaces, they were traps. Hallways became corridors of dread. Willis later explained, "I wanted the city to look like it was closing in on him." What audiences didn't know is that many studios hated Willis's style, saying Prince came back too dim. But Redford and Pollock loved it. That oppressive gloom gave Condor its suffocating paranoia. Not bright espionage, but horror of the everyday. Viewers didn't just watch Turner hunted, they felt the walls closing in on themselves. 17. Paramount tried to tone down the politics. The mid-1970s were a minefield of scandals. With Watergate fresh and the CIA under fire, Paramount executives panicked that Condor was too political. Internal memos urged Pollock to make it more entertainment, less exposé. But Pollock and Redford pushed back, arguing the film's power came from its political edge. Compromises were struck. Dialogue was softened, but much of the subtext stayed. Ironically, the controversy fueled publicity. The more the studio tried to tone it down, the louder critics framed it as the defining Watergate paranoia thriller. What audiences didn't know is that Condor nearly emerged as a neutered chase flick. Instead, thanks to Pollock and Redford's resistance, it carried the sting of a headline disguised as cinema. 18. Redford studied real CIA analysts for the role. To ground his performance, Robert Redford didn't just rely on the script, he went straight to the source. He quietly interviewed actual CIA analysts in Washington, some off the record. What struck him wasn't their glamour, but their monotony. They were readers, researchers, men and women who spent hours combing through obscure publications. Redford shaped Joe Turner not as James Bond, but as an intellectual suddenly forced into survival. The idea that a guy who just reads books could threaten the CIA, that fascinated me, Redford said later. What audiences didn't know was that his authenticity came from real fieldwork. Turner wasn't fantasy. He was the nightmare scenario, an ordinary analyst stumbling onto something too big and paying the price. 19. Von Sydow rewrote his chilling final lines. The rooftop goodbye between Turner and Joubert is one of the film's eeriest moments. Joubert calmly explains how assassins outlive nations, warning Turner he may survive only by becoming like him. Those lines weren't in the script. Max von Sydow reportedly suggested them after reading about mercenaries in Africa. Pollock embraced the addition, filming it with minimal direction. The result? A scene that feels like prophecy. What audiences didn't know is that one of the most haunting speeches in the film came not from a screenwriter, but from an actor channeling real-world history. 20. The film influenced the CIA's own image. Here's the strangest twist. 3 Days of the Condor didn't just reflect the CIA, it shaped how the public viewed the agency. After its release, several ex-CIA officers admitted the film was so effective at depicting paranoia that it colored how recruits, journalists, and even politicians imagined covert work. The idea of bookish analysts uncovering world-shaking plots entered pop culture. Some officers even nicknamed certain researchers Condors. What audiences didn't know is that the film blurred fiction and fact so powerfully it bent reality. Condor wasn't just a movie, it became part of the CIA's myth, an accidental PR nightmare that haunted the agency long after the credits rolled. Bonus fact, the film was almost called The CIA in Crisis. Before Paramount settled on 3 Days of the Condor, one proposed working title was shockingly blunt: The CIA in Crisis. Executives feared it would draw lawsuits, or worse, government interference. The name was quickly buried, but storyboards and early press sheets still carried it. Imagine the outrage in 1975 if a major studio had openly branded its thriller with those words. What audiences never knew is that Condor could have hit theaters wearing its politics on its sleeve. Instead, it hid behind metaphor, making it even more powerful. 3 Days of the Condor wasn't just another Cold War spy movie. It was a haunted mirror reflecting the fear and mistrust of a nation unraveling. Every production fight, every paranoid coincidence, every rewrite made it sharper. And decades later, its warnings about secrecy, power, and truth still feel painfully relevant. If you learned something new, hit like, drop your favorite fact in the comments, and subscribe for more untold stories from behind the silver screen. Because in the world of cinema, just like in Condor, nothing is ever quite what it seems.